Hey y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board. To find more about the benefits of being a veteran in the great state of Texas, check out vob.texas.gov. My next guest today is the Director of Veterans Programs at PeopleFund, Grant Bennett, who is also an Army veteran as well. Grant, thanks for being on the program with us today. I'm excited about our conversation. Before we dig into it, tell us about your military background.
Well, first off, Dan, absolute honor to be here. Very excited. You've had a list of great veterans on the podcast already. Off the top, Molly Mae Potter, who I went to grad school with. I mean, she's just a legend, right? Like she's awesome.
She's a rock star, man. She helped me kick this whole thing off. So I owe her a big debt of gratitude. You got big shoes to fill too, you know?
Yeah, which is hard to believe. It's hard to believe that she's ever done anything wrong. Like I've only seen everything she touched turn to gold. Ian Falau, another VC based here in Austin, a great kind of veteran entrepreneur story. Came out, started his own company, sold it, which is always a big success. And then successful VC here in the. I mean, he's based in Austin, but his scope is really kind of the nation. So another great guest that you had there as well. So very honored to be here. As far as myself, if you would have came up to me on the football field on graduation night and said that, hey, you're about to go into the military, I'd have told you were crazy, right? But probably a month into that summer, getting ready to go off to college, I completely turned and joined the U.S. Army, and it was a very kind of quick decision, but it's by no means a decision I regret. It completely changed the trajectory of my life for the better. I served 3 years on active duty as a Patriot missile operator, which was really cool back in like the early 90s, and not the coolest, slickest place to be in 2007, but that was what appealed to me at the time. And then after 3 years, I had a lot of goals that I still wanted to do within the military. But then I also knew that I needed to get started to work on my kind of professional and personal career. And so I transitioned into the Texas Army National Guard. Now, at the time, there was a brand new unit that was the only airborne infantry unit in the National Guard. And it was interesting. Our battalion, we had 2 companies in Austin. We had a company in Alaska, and we had a company in Rhode Island. And I mean, I don't know what the regular or like the other National Guard experience was, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time there with the airborne infantry unit. I spent 5 years there, and it was a lot of schools. I was going to school at the time for my undergrad, but I was going to a lot of military schools. I was working full time for the unit a lot. Drill back then was every month. It was at least 4 days. So a lot of time went towards that, which I really enjoyed it. And I got to do a lot of the goals and the things I wanted to do in the military while still going and pursuing my undergrad degree, which is really kind of a great blend of the two.
Can I pause you real quick? Did you enjoy the experience of having the academic and intellectual, pursuit of college, as well as kind of the physical and mental toughness of being in the military at the same time? That was something I never did. And I always kind of wondered how, veterans or those on the reserve kind of balance that within their personal and professional life.
Yes. Yeah. So I like having a lot going on, and I like having a lot going on in different domains. And that worked really, really well. To me, drill was stressful. Some people might find this funny with their National Guard experience, but to me, that week, 2 weeks coming into it, I'm checking all pieces of gear. You know what I mean? I'm going through everything. How am I going to mess up? Like, that was stressful. And it was always kind of like, I need to keep physically sharp. I need to keep mentally fit. But then also, obviously, undergrad is a big pool of time as well. I always really enjoyed it. And I think both of those are key to life anyways. But in that experience, all that, the parameters are kind of given to you, right? when you fully transition out, then you've got to provide a lot of those things yourself. You've got to pursue the intellectual side of it. You've got to pursue the physical side of it on your own, because nobody there is kind of pushing you forward.
So tell us about what PeopleFund is and how you got involved with it after you finished your education.
So PeopleFund is a nonprofit. We're based out of Texas. And what we do is we lend to small businesses that traditional banks typically skip over. And so what that looks like is it's typically going to be businesses or business owners that are low to moderate income, that are minorities, that are women. And we also, PeopleFund, focus on military veterans as well. And so with that, as the director of veteran programs, I look at both our statewide program for veterans and our national program for veterans, which we can get to in a little bit. What's a funny story is, while I was still in the Guard and pursuing my undergrad, I also thought, like I mentioned earlier, I like to be busy. I also thought, oh, I need to add an internship in here as well. And so I was at a conference and some lady spoke and was talking about this great organization. And I thought, oh, that's the one to go after. And you know, I showed up for my internship and I never left. Nobody ever told me to leave, so I just kept showing up. And eventually they're like, well, I guess we got to hire this guy. And so, yeah, I started working there full time. I made next to no money, and I've been there ever since. I'm going on almost 6 years.
Well, I think that's actually a critical joint in your experience after the service and kind of the bridge, if you will. And I think for some veterans, and especially I'd love to even talk specifically to graduates who are leaving the military right now, or leaving college right now. And there's not maybe the job force out there that there was 6 to 9 to 12 months ago. And my message to them, as well as I think what you just described, was sometimes you have to start out maybe a little bit lower on the elevator than you wanted to, but it allowed you to have a foot in the door, even if you felt like you should be compensated more. Can you talk about, did you have a focus on the long term? Was there any frustration about starting out as an intern or maybe not being as paid as much as you have? And can you relate that experience to maybe some of the experience that the current college students who are graduating may be facing as well?
Yeah. My perspective is as an enlisted person, and I don't know if it would necessarily translate as an officer or not. I just can't speak to it. But as I think about it, at that time, I mean, I was eating, I'd been off active duty for 4 years, and I had just been eating some humble pie that whole time, right? Things were just like, a lot of things were going the right way. A lot of things were a struggle, like a deep, deep struggle, right? And I think a lot of people see that anyways. So at the time when I was applying for this internship, like I was flattered that they would even let me in the door, to be frank. But yeah, that was my mindset, is like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to work as hard as I can, as if they were paying me $1 million, right? Like it didn't even cross my mind. I knew that the experience and just being able to apply hard work towards something was going to be a positive either right then or down the road. And, you know, looking back, it worked out. And, you know, I can't think of any other approach that I would have wanted to take, right? Like I started at the very, very bottom. And I was willing to start at the bottom. Because the thing is if I interned there and I work somewhere else, it's still a way to get in, right? You can try out here, and if you keep pecking and you're just going to frustrate yourself. It's, you know, asymmetric warfare. You got to find that angle to where you fit in to get to on the path to where you want to go. And that was another thing, is I knew that as long as I could get on the path, that was the important part. I might not be as far along the path that I wanted to be, but just being on the path was a huge step up from where I was at. So
was the nonprofit world, was even, you know, you're in finance, you have a great perspective on what small business looks like, the struggle of small business, entrepreneurs, and even to some degree, not to, use too much hyperbole, but providing a lifeline to some of these businesses and to some of these people. When you look back with hindsight, how maybe obvious does it seem that you're in this role or that you're in this industry, or how maybe unpredictable do you think it was?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I was part of this leadership group that was, other nonprofits like we are. And they were like, it was a vision board. And I don't want to get too far out here, but they were like, put the two big interests that you have in life and just kind of put them out there so you can see them on a board, and then just kind of put images around it or whatever. And my two images were the chevrons of an NCO, which is basically service towards veterans and the military, and then CDFIs, or small business ownership, right? And what's funny about that is probably a year after that, the role that I'm in right now, we basically created, and it is exactly the role that would be reflected in that vision board. So, part of it is, I don't know what word you'd want to put to it, serendipity or whatever, but it seemed chaotic a lot of the times. But then looking back at it, I can see the through line that's kind of brought me here to exactly where I want to be. One thing I knew when I was going to start my career is that it had to be service oriented some way, somehow. And so we operate very much like any other traditional loan fund. We have a budget, there's a P&L, there's a balance sheet, there's a works, like all of that is there. The only component there is that we're trying to help out people that banks typically do not help out, who they think of as a higher risk. But I mean, the secret is they're not a higher risk. Our loss rates are at or below typical banks. So that component of service, I think, is really big for veterans. A lot of our portfolio business owners have some component in their business that's giving back either to veterans specifically or their greater community, right? So that's a big one, I think, is focusing on service towards other, with either within your career or something on the side that you're dedicating time to.
So we had a great conversation about entrepreneurship and why I keep going back to your internship, why I keep going back to the fact that you stayed around, why I keep going back to the fact that you invested in the workplace, you invested in the staff that was there, you learned the company, you learned the culture. It paid off because you were actually able to create a position at a company, which is a lot different, because we spend a lot of time discussing and promoting entrepreneurial aspects for actual entrepreneurs. But your message, and I think your experience, especially professionally, has been one of entrepreneurship. Can you speak to that a little bit, and maybe some of the lessons that you've learned in essentially creating a job for yourself within a job?
Yeah. So, when we think of entrepreneurship, it's basically one person creating a team to create a business that offers product, services, etc., right? Entrepreneurship is basically doing the same exact thing, but doing it within an existing company. And we see this, across companies. And the good thing is that every company needs to have some type of entrepreneurial spirit that's out there trying new things and is trying to find the next best thing for the company. And so from my perspective, as veterans are starting to leave active duty and kind of go into the professional environment, I'm a huge proponent of entrepreneurship for them. I think veterans make great entrepreneurs. I also think a lot of the skills that make them great entrepreneurs make them great for the corporate environment. But within that environment, there's a number of ways that they can look for and create opportunities that's going to provide value for the business and for the customers that business serves. So, with my example specifically, we had a statewide veteran loan fund and program for Texas, and we had a lot of success with it. And then our prior CEO, Gary Lindner, was or is a retired Air Force colonel and was a fighter pilot during Vietnam, right? And so as he was the CEO, he wanted to start this veteran loan program for the state. And then we had a lot of success for it, and then we wanted to scale that to take it national, right? Well, that if you were to do that outside of PeopleFund, that is entrepreneurship. All of the rules apply, all of the skills apply there, but you're just doing it and using some of the assets that are already there with the established company, right? So there's some pros and there's some cons to both entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. But I think entrepreneurship is a great path for veterans as they're starting to work for companies, and just taking a lot of the skills that entrepreneurs espouse and then just applying it to their individual roles.
So because PeopleFund has expanded and you've been really kind of on the forefront of pushing that out, what are some of the things that you're seeing, either successes or failures in kind of the businesses that you've come encounter with?
Yeah, so I think as far as, I think the success and the failures are married to each other a lot, in that what's causing people to fail are some blind spots that veterans can have as they're leaving active duty. And what success entails is usually identifying those blind spots and then overcoming them and moving forward. When we think of veteran entrepreneurs or veterans that are trying to start their small businesses, we know that there are three main issues that they're facing, right? The first issue is a professional network. Your entire professional network is on active duty. When you leave, I always think of it as a train. You get off at the stop and the train keeps going, right? When you're on active duty, you have a national, international network that you can tap into at any time. It's great. It's tremendous. There's nothing quite like it, right? But once you leave, the train keeps going and you've got no one, because everyone's on that train. They got mission. They're mission focused, right? So they'll be there to help, to really kind of dive in. It's hard for them. So you've got to figure out how to build that professional network as you leave the military. The second issue is kind of the business acumen, the business knowledge, right? When you're in the military, if you're an infantryman or if you're an infantry person, I guess that's the title for it now, you don't worry about supply. You don't worry about a lot of the logistics issues, right? You're just focused on the mission. Now, if you're the logistics person, you're not worried about pulling the trigger. You're worried about figuring out how to do the logistics, right? So as a veteran and you leave, you need to be focused on, you need to be a subject matter expert in whatever the product is or services that you're going to offer. But there's a lot of times there's not a team there, right? You've still got to know how to put together a business plan. You've still got to know how to, put together your financial statements and understand your financial statements. But you don't need to be a CPA. You just need to have a basic understanding of these things, right? And there's a number of those things that veterans need to have as they're starting their small business, but their service has not kind of set them up for. So that business acumen and business knowledge is another big issue that veterans have to address. And the third, and really the biggest, is access to capital, right? Veterans apply for access to capital to start or grow their small businesses more frequently than civilians, but also they receive less money than civilians. And there's a number of statistics that kind of point to the fact that veterans have a harder time getting access to capital to start or grow their small business. And that's really where we come in and try to focus in on, is that niche. But the other side of that is we try to build out an ecosystem with us providing the access to capital and some education towards gaining capital, but then also partnering with other organizations that provide the professional networking and provide the business acumen and knowledge skills, so that we can kind of tie in and provide this kind of 360 approach to make success more possible for veterans.
Is there an industry that you see more often coming to you?
A specific industry, not necessarily. I will say though, if we think about how businesses get funded, the two main approaches are debt and equity. And so on the equity side, we think of it as, venture capitalists, angel investors, to some degree, private equity folks. If you do an initial public offering, that's an equity investment, and that is just basically people giving you money in exchange for ownership in the business. The other side of that is debt, and basically it works as, you get a lump sum of cash, and then you pay it back over a number of years plus a little bit of interest, right? I will say that the industries and the business models lend themselves better to one or the other, right? If you go to an equity investor, right now, their focus is growth, right? Like they want to see a really high kind of top line revenue. They want to see millions of users with your company, and they're trying to get 20 to 50x return on whatever their investment is, right? They want like big home run shots. The other side of that is debt, and with debt is more of kind of like the Main Street small businesses that you think of. So we see a lot of construction companies, a lot of trucking companies. We see a lot of restaurants, those types of, a lot of brick and mortar, a lot of service-based businesses are usually what we see a lot of veterans in our portfolio go towards. Franchising is another big one. My whole thing with debt is a lot of times as you're leaving service, the types of companies that debt is really good for is usually types of companies that veterans are good to start, because if you're on active duty for 10 years and you're coming out and you want to start your business and you were combat armed, you don't have the engineering skills over the past 10 years that it's going to take to create that software company that's going to be really good for an equity investment, right? I mean, it's not uncommon, it's out there. But typically what we see in a broad swath is a lot of veterans that are starting their small businesses are usually much more tailored towards debt investments than equity investments.
Well, this has been a really insightful conversation. I appreciate you coming on the program today and really providing some really invaluable insight, not just from the career experience and growth that you have had, but also a kind of a great landscape on the challenges as well as the successes that you are seeing businesses come to PeopleFund, and the conversations that you're having with small business. I know it's such a key component of the state of Texas, as well as communities across the nation. One more thing before we go, I think we got to cover a lot of ground, but is there something maybe we didn't get to hit on today that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think, in closing, just speaking directly to veterans that have an interest in entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, is just reach out. Reach out to myself, reach out. There's a ton of organizations out there that are specific to veteran entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And the only thing that they take is your time and just putting yourself out there, right? That's all it takes. Just pursue that interest, start pulling that thread, and eventually, again, like we mentioned at the top here, is you put yourself on that path, and eventually you're going to get down it, right? So it's at least an option to explore. There's a ton of resources out there for folks, and the majority of them are free. But just put yourself on that path if you have an interest on it, and start walking down it. And then if it comes to a point where, it's not right for you, you can always go back to whatever you were doing in the meantime. But just pursue it and see what's out there. Veterans have the skills to do this type of work. And there are a ton of resources out there to help them along the way.
Well, Grant, I appreciate you being on the show today and being really a great example and continuing to serve in the community and serving the community through PeopleFund. And thanks for being on the program today. I think Molly May set the bar pretty high, but you know what? We keep raising it every week. So thanks for being with us today.
I'm going to tell you said that.
And for everybody at home, before we go, Grant, you have a very great mustache. I just wanted to make sure that we gave you the props on that. Is that going to continue to happen after COVID, or how's this going to work out?
That's the question in the office: is does it stay when we're
So
all in person?
There's a
people
bet
got to
with the
see this
staff.
thing. Yeah, got to see it face to face. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to at least test it to make sure that it's not too horrendous in person. But if it is, it might have to go. So.
Hey, well, thanks for having some fun with us, and thanks for talking a little personal and professional development. Keep up the great work, and we look forward to having you back on the program in the future.
Of course. Yes, sir. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board, thank you once again for joining the Next Gen Warrior Show and discussing the personal and professional development stories of veterans here in the great state as well as across the nation. While so many veterans are leaving the service and entering civilian life, if you've enjoyed our conversations, please share it with them, and let's continue to promote the success of veterans after the military. My name is Dan Hamilton. We will talk to you next week.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.